Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Alan Shell from the Wolper Hospital, and thank you all for coming along for, I guess for many of us, a very difficult subject in that one day we're going to die. But we'd like to have a good death, and we'd like to be dying with care. Wolper Hospital has been involved in particular with palliative care for well over 25 years, and Dr. Phil Redelman, one of our visiting palliative care physicians, is here tonight. The background of the hospital is it's a hospital supported by the Jewish community for over 50 years now, and we pride ourselves in giving people the best of care throughout their life. Tonight we have a couple of people that I'd like to introduce. First will be Claire Vernon from JewishCare. JewishCare is part of our Jewish community groups, and Wolper Hospital certainly works well with JewishCare, as JewishCare works well within the community. And I'll introduce Claire just shortly. We also have our moderator, Julie McCrossin, who many of you know very well, freelance journalist, facilitator, trainer, and has been part of our Q&A and Wellbeing evenings many times. Professor Debbie Horsfall, Miss Anne Meller, Dr. Kathrine Hammill, Dr. Liz Harper, and as I said, Dr. Phil Redelman. So I'm just going to give a couple of minutes to Claire just to talk about JewishCare, and then we'll hand over to Julie to continue on with the evening. For those who have mobile phones, please put them on silent or turn them down. There is going to be opportunity for questions, as we all know, but Julie will be in charge of that. So sit back and learn and listen, and I won't say enjoy, but I think be informed. Claire, over to you.
Thanks, Alan. For over 80 years, JewishCare has been there for the community. Today, we are helping people with a disability, people living with mental illness, family breakdown, and helping the aged to remain living at home. As the major provider of community-based care in the Jewish community, we support people at challenging times in their life. And death and dying is invariably one of the most challenging issues we all have to face. For many years, JewishCare's Hesed Bereavement Support Program, led by Kahn, who's on the panel tonight, has helped people deal with the process of death and loss. In this very sensitive area, we at JewishCare work closely with other institutions in the community, particularly working with the rabbis and with the Hevra Kadisha. For the last few years, we've had a great partnership with the Wolper Jewish Hospital, which I know has been of great benefit to many families. So thanks to Wolper for inviting JewishCare to partner with you tonight, and we look forward to continue working together to improve the lives of community members for many years to come. Thanks, Alan.
Apologies, I did forget our friend Kahn, who's been working with us a number of years, and I'll now hand over to Julie. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Oh, come on. Good evening. I don't myself feel concerned about this as a topic, but thank you. It is a smaller group than normal, and that shows that people talking directly about dying obviously is more challenging. But I just happened to have spent a day today where I began with an elderly friend from my faith community, taking her to radiation therapy, and she's 89. I then went to a 99-year-old's very happy birthday at Montefiore. Irene survived the Warsaw Ghetto and is going strong at 99 and still enjoying her life. And I visited my 92-year-old mother at hospital. 4 years ago, I had stage 4 cancer. I have a passionate interest in dying with care, in making that last part of my life and the life of people I love as good and as full as possible, and hopefully to end it in a pain-free way. Who doesn't want that to be the case? So tonight we're going to talk with this panel of experts about what is palliative care, what does it mean in the home, in a hospital, in a hospice, how can we get access to it, and when do you need it? What is this thing called dying? And we're also going to take a look at what can we do when we're well to put in place advanced planning to give us the best chance of the death we desire. Now, I just want to begin. There is an expression called a good death. It's used by Palliative Care Australia. And I think there's mixed feelings. First of all, I want to come to Des. Des, tell us, just explain what your job is in a nutshell, close to your mouth with volume.
My job at Wolper is that I work with patients in the palliative sections, and usually there are dying patients or end-of-life patients, and with their families. At JewishCare, I work and coordinate the bereavement service with a number of other therapists and support workers who are volunteers. And what we do then is we support the bereaved post-death.
I used that expression, good death, with you earlier, and you didn't like it. So explain, why don't you like that expression, good death, and is there a term that you prefer if we talk about what we're aiming for?
Well, I think the word good, implies, the other side implies bad. And death is very, very individual. The dying process is very individual. It depends what, from a physical point of view, what you're going through. And it also then depends from an emotional point of view as to how you handle it and what type of support you have. So I would resolve from using the word good as such, but that would be as a comfortable, pain-free and meaningful a process for both for the person who is dying and for their loved ones.
And could you talk about meaning? What do you mean by meaningful?
Meaningful in the sense that that I am at this point of transition, that I have no idea, but I think people have beliefs, and I'm not questioning anybody's belief system. Everybody has a different belief system. That I am leaving this physical world or this physical body, and it is very, very scary for most people. And it's the ability to somehow be present in that moment with my loved ones, and to take my leave, and for the loved ones to do the same.
And in your experience, I know this is awfully hard to do briefly, but what usually precedes the capacity to overcome the fear of death and find some sort of peace in that last period, which may be, of course, weeks or months, it may not just be a matter of days. Is there anything we can do to try and overcome our fears in advance so we're more likely to be at peace for the sake of ourselves and our families?
Well, I don't know whether we really overcome those fears, and having not actually ever been there as yet, but within the next 20 or 30 years, I will be there hopefully at 20 or 30 years. But I think that what's important in that process is the ability to be able to feel that as much unfinished business as possible has been completed, that I know that I'm loved, that my life has had value, and that the people around me feel the same thing, and that I know that I will be missed, and that I have added value to their lives as well.
Thank you so much. Could you pass the microphone to Dr. Harper, who's just beside you? And Dr. Liz Harper is a geriatrician who's working at Wolper Jewish Hospital and also at St Vincent's. And could you explain, what do you think of the term good death? How would you describe a good death?
Thanks, Julie.
Nice and close to your mouth.
Well, I'm a very clinical doctor, so I can only talk about it in more clinical terms.
Yeah, closer to your mouth.
Not spiritual. And in terms of clinical, well, I would like the patient to be comfortable and at peace, not in any pain, and that their family are also comfortable and well supported during that last stage. So it is more of a clinical front, but that's what I feel is a good death, and rather than avoiding pain and any distress in the patient nor in the family.
Our Wolper Jewish Hospital have called this dying with care, and it's left a question in my mind: when do I, as a patient, leave the geriatrician, Dr. Elizabeth Harper, and come over to Dr. Redelman, the palliative care physician? I won't come to him yet. Can you describe the patients that you're generally working with, and when is the time that you might try to work with Dr. Redelman?
Well, actually, Philip...
Nice and close.
Oh, sorry.
Almost like you're licking it, trust me.
We work well together. We've got a lot of, there's a common interface between palliative care and geriatrics. A lot of my conditions aren't just cancer. Of course, cancer is common in older, frail patients, but also patients with end-stage heart failure, end-stage respiratory failure, patients with advanced dementia. And in those patients, we talk about planning, about what's going to happen from hospital, and often I introduce Philip at Wolper or in the community to talk about what do we do next, and planning that there is going to be an end stage, and we'd rather face it and not have any problems or have any concerns. So there's a significant interface between geriatrics and palliative care.
And is it a blurred line as to when you might be beginning palliative care and when you're being cared for in the mainstream medicine? Like, what's the difference between the comforting care of a geriatrician and the comfort care of a palliative physician?
Sure, Julia. Well, I do active treat. I'm an active treatment, but I recognise I'll treat pneumonia, I'll treat whatever conditions I can, but there is a point where treatment becomes futile, and that's when I will ask Philip to be involved to make sure that I'm respecting a patient's dignity and wishes and looking at the big picture. I think also I know Philip involves the geriatrician with his patients because he might be interested in the rehabilitation, the mobility, certain areas that are also the interface with geriatrics. So there is often, it's very blurred lines, and I think the difference is I think probably geriatricians do, for instance, we use intravenous antibiotics, and at other times we'll use oral antibiotics, so that's where probably the difference is. And often I'm involved in a patient's care in their journey earlier on. I have patients that I might follow for 5 to 10 years, and I know what their wishes are. I've spoken to them before, and then I'll ask Philip to be involved to make sure that my patients are comfortable and their wishes are respected.
Thank you, and when it's close you can hear it's much louder, it's good. You're working both in the Catholic system and the Jewish system, so this next question I guess goes to this issue of that Des raised about people have fears. If people are expressing fear of death, I don't know if there's existential unease, that sort of fear that can come around the time of death, when would you call in a spiritual comfort, or do you think more in terms of Ativan and medication? Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you do with that fear that people have?
Look, we do address it early on. I have to admit, I am a clinical doctor, so I look at comfort, and that's my primary cause. But I am lucky I do work in 2 hospitals where a patient's spirituality is always considered, and both at St Vincent and at Wolper. So I've got supports in the team with Des and the nursing staff, and with Dr. Redelman. So I think the spiritual side is very important. That's why I think talking to patients about what their fear is. A lot of my families might say, don't talk to them, don't mention it, don't tell them. And it's the patient who will initiate the conversation with me because they're well and truly, they want to know, and they've got their own spiritual concerns.
And what do they want to know? You said you had someone cognitively intact today who asked you a difficult question.
Yes, he wanted to go out to pasture. He was a farmer, and he did ask why would a cardiologist want to put in a pacemaker? And we spoke more in terms of his overall symptoms that we could manage. He felt that his heart had run out and it was time for it all to stop. But this was a fellow that could express those concerns, and we were able to sit down and have a conversation about why, what was the value about having a pacemaker put in, and it was good. It's his birthday tomorrow. He's 96 tomorrow. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to speak a little to Dr. Redelman, then I'll come to some questions, and then I'll come back to our other panel members. So I'd like to introduce now Dr. Philip Redelman, who's a palliative care physician at St Vincent's and at Wolper Jewish Hospital, and we had a quick meeting in the public hospital foyer, so you get around.
Thank you very much. Could I just say a few words of what's already been said? Palliative care, I guess we're trying to change our name. People always thought of us as terminal care, and really what we are today is supportive care.
So what does that mean?
So it's like Liz was saying, today there's a blur between when we become active and when when Liz is working. So at times people are getting just frailer and sicker, and if we can support them to get on with their life, that is good medicine, that's good palliative care, it's good supportive care. So we're very fortunate here. Like in America, they have a cut-off. You must be either palliative care or hospice care, or you're in oncology. You can't be in both. But we know today that with good supportive care, certainly patients with cancers and non-cancer patients, they do better. They get on with their life at times with the help of the palliative care services. So it's not a black and white anymore.
When we spoke, I mentioned I have a friend who's very much in terminal cancer, who's receiving palliative care, who's been to Hong Kong for a week. You know, so it challenges that vision that you're bedridden. It's not necessarily so, is it?
No, it's not. And again, as I said to Julie the other day, he went to the wrong country because he won't get insurance to go to Hong Kong. But if he'd gone to Italy or New Zealand, he would have had Medicare.
When I spoke to Dr. Redelman, he said he's a practical man. So I just want to ask you a couple of practical questions before I go to the floor. Imagine Liz has referred you to talk to a patient and to meet a family. What are the first things you do as you get to know a person and work out what their palliative needs might be?
I guess I have a trick question. I ask all my patients. I simply say, if I had a magic wand, how could I help you the most today, realistically? Because my wife's already taken the money. And it's interesting what they reply and what they tell me they want, and that's where I start. If they talk about their wishes to travel or something, well, we talk about that. If they want to just say, I want to eat or something like that, we talk about appetites and what we can do. And it leads on to discussions like that just by a simple question, finding out what they want. They lead the discussion. It's not me saying what I want them to do. It's all about what they want.
And is there a significant difference between palliative care in your home, in a hospital, or in a hospice?
Well, certainly...
Close to a minute.
Yeah, sorry, certainly the amount of care may be different in all these places, but certainly there certainly is a difference. I mean, I think, first of all, in a hospice, all the staff want to help you and support you and things like that. In a hospital, a general hospital ward, you may be actually on a surgical ward where the nurses want to do surgery. They don't want to, or they are scared to do palliative care. So there may be differences. But certainly, and then when you get home, now it depends where you live. If you live in the eastern suburbs, you have a wonderful support system, far better than in other areas of health. So if you talk about being at home in Sydney, the Sacred Heart has a community palliative care team that will go to your home. We will take a nurse out there, a social worker, an occupational therapist, physiotherapist, a pastoral care, a psychologist. All of these people can go to your home. And on top of that, we have a large supply of equipment. Now, you can go out west, and I've made a phone call to the palliative care sister who's the community. I said, when will you see the patient? And she says, I don't see the patient, I just answer the phone. So we're very lucky in this area, and there's quite a team that can come to you. Have a little plug on how to access the team. You need to do it through your GPs, and they should know how to ring up the Sacred Heart Hospice. That's where the team is based. It doesn't mean that if you get sick, you have to be admitted to the Sacred Heart or St Vincent's, but that's just where the community base is.
Look, thank you. Just to let you know, on the panel in a moment, I'll be speaking to Anne Meller, who's a clinical nurse consultant at Prince of Wales, and she'll be talking about the advanced planning. And we also have Debbie Horsfall, a sociologist and researcher who's done particular research on people dying at home. But I thought we'd take a few questions first, and then I'll come to the panel. So if you wave, guys, I come to you with my microphone with electric speed, despite a slight limp. Thank you.
Francine Lazarus. The dying with dignity, which is a completely different thing than dying with care, which is now being debated in Victoria. How do you respond to that? Anybody on the panel?
Thank you. So it's this question of legislation being discussed in various parts of Australia where under certain circumstances adults may request medical assistance to die. Now, that isn't our topic tonight, and we haven't got someone here specifically on that. Is there anyone who would mind just commenting? Liz, do you want to begin as a doctor on the panel, then I'll come to Philip? That was a rhetorical question.
Not really, Julie, but it's interesting. I've had 3 people ask me this in the last 2 days.
Oh, almost leak it, trust me, guys.
And since it was in the Sydney Morning Herald, a lot of my patients have been very excited to open up the headlines and see the dying with dignity discussion. Look, I think it's going to be a hard discussion for a lot of my patients with dementia, because it's going to pertain to patients with good cognitive and able to make their own decisions. But it is a difference. I'm not too sure I'm the best person to comment on it. I'd like to think that we give all our patients dignity when they die. That would be the mainstay, but that's a choice thing as well. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, Philip, what's your comment?
I guess it's very hard for me. I have some very fixed views. I have, from my background as well, as an Orthodox Jewish person. First of all, euthanasia, let's call it euthanasia, or we actually move to one word further and say this is actually, I believe, it's deliberately ending someone's life. So I'm not interested in euthanasia or any of this process. And I also know that obviously in the units that I work with, being a Catholic institution and a Jewish institution, this will never be implemented. But saying that, most of my patients we see today, often they're saying to us, yes, I'd like to die, and I'd like to die soon. But very few of patients actually saying to us, can you do something about it? Now, I have to be fair that I think some of them, that they realise that we won't do anything about it, so they do occasionally raise the issue, or we talk about comfort, talk about what they want to see, what we can do to help them. But the concept of euthanasia is one about control, that you want to control when you die, and that's what it's all about. And I think today, I suppose I shouldn't say this, but I believe there's a lot of good drugs out there if anyone really wanted to take them. And if you really want to do it yourself quietly and don't tell us about it. And that's what it should be. Having euthanasia will make something kosher. That's what you're looking for. You can do it now. And I believe that there's plenty of good drugs out there to do it.
Could I come to Anne Meller for a moment? Anne, can you take the mic? I'm up here, Anne. Anne Meller is a clinical nurse consultant at Prince of Wales Hospital and has worked a lot in aged care. And just explain what your job is now, and really close to your mouth and speak up, please.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for inviting me here tonight. I'm a nurse consultant. My background's been in aged care since about...
Trust me, you need to really put it close and speak loud. This is a gentle system, just trust me.
I'm a nurse... That sounds better, I can hear myself. I've been working in a program on advanced care planning at Prince of Wales since 2001. It was just a little pilot service that started up. And prior to that, I worked in aged care in the community out at Concord in the aged care assessment team. So my background's aged care. It's not palliative care. But I've worked very closely with Philip and the community staff at Sacred Heart over the last 15 years. And we've got a lot in parallel. We've got some really good parallel systems that we confer together on a lot of things.
Why I brought you in now, Anne, is because the word control was mentioned by Dr. Redelman. Yeah. And one of the things Anne does is go out to families and talk to them about planning ahead for how people may wish to die. How do you deal with that question of control?
I guess for a lot of people it's about having a discussion with their family about, or people close to them, about what's important in their life. And for yourselves tonight, if you don't want to think about this or you don't want to talk about it, think about who's going to make decisions for you if you can't do that for yourself. Because in New South Wales, in terms of health, we need to get consent from someone to treat them. And there's a very particular hierarchy of who can consent to your medical treatment. And so that hierarchy, so everyone in the audience, just think about who would make decisions for you. The first person the doctors will ask for, is there an appointed guardian for this person? And that includes an enduring guardian. Hands up those of you who've appointed an enduring guardian. Right, okay. So for those of you who don't have a guardian, if something happens to you tomorrow and the doctors need to get consent, we'd look for a spouse. Hands up if you've got a spouse. Spouse includes same-sex partners and de factos. Okay, so for those of you who don't have a spouse, then it's a carer. Now that carer is an unpaid carer. They might be a neighbour, or you might get the carer payment or a carer allowance. So many of you mightn't have a guardian or a spouse or a carer. Then it comes down to any other relative or friend with a close and continuing relationship with the person. So that probably covers most people in the audience. Some people don't have anybody. They've got no one in their lives, and they might want to think about creating a plan. So what I get people to do is when I go out and think, who'd make decisions for you if you couldn't do that for themselves? And if you don't like the person that is going to fall to in your hierarchy, I've heard some people go, oh my goodness, I don't have a guardian, I don't have a spouse, I haven't got a carer. Oh my goodness, it's my 3 brothers that I fight all the time. You might not want your brothers, or you might be really close to one brother, or one of your kids you might be closer with than another. So it's thinking about just sensibly, away from hospital or at the kitchen table, who you would want to make decisions for you if you couldn't do that for yourself.
Now, and I want to come to a few more questions, but as we've raised it, just explain in a nutshell what is an enduring guardianship form about, and how do you get one?
Okay, so enduring guardians is someone you can appoint to make your health and lifestyle decisions. It's different to power of attorney or enduring power of attorney. So many of you might have done a will, and there might be solicitors here, so feel free to correct me. But enduring power of attorney, that's the person who manages your finances. They can sell your home, they can sell your shares. Health and lifestyle matters, where you live, what services you receive, your accommodation. The person in New South Wales that we look for is called an enduring guardian. They can make your health and lifestyle decisions for you, but not your enduring power of attorney. So an enduring guardianship appointment, you need to go to a solicitor to get that made, or you can download a form and you can go to your local magistrate if it's fairly simple. So I won't go into a lot more detail about that.
Thank you, and we can answer more questions if you wish later. The word enduring simply means that if you lose cognitive capacity, decision-making capacity, the person can continue to make decisions for you. I've got one lady here, and then I'll come to you.
Yes, the first is a comment. I have been to several of these forums, and I find that the emphasis or the predetermining factor of a, quote, a good or a meaningful death is having family around you when you die. Now, I would hazard a guess that there are many people in the community that do not have family. What about these people? How do they have a good or a meaningful death? And in the forefront of the news of late has been a great deal of abuse in hospitals. And I think many people are fearful of that kind of neglect. And my second is a question: at what point does medical technology blur the lines between an existence and a life?
What I might do, if I may, is do the first one first, because they're both so big, we won't be able to hold them in our minds. Could I come first of all, if I may, so I introduce our other panel member to Debbie Horsfall, who's a Professor of Sociology at Western Sydney University with a particular interest as a researcher in end-of-life care and dying at home. And why I've come to you is this question of what if you don't have a family? What are your thoughts about that? Nice and close to your mouth, Deb.
Okay, so the work that I do is working in the community with carers and communities. Oh, I thought it was close. Oh, that's
yes,
better.
but louder.
Yeah, louder. Okay. One of the things that we found in the work that we did is actually families often aren't central. Even if there is a family, they often aren't central in terms of the caring, or they might not be the people that you want to have around. Friends are far more enduring, which was quite an interesting finding and something that people often don't pick up on. So we talk a lot about families, or we expect somebody in the family to step into that caring role. I think we've got unrealistic expectations. I agree with you, actually.
So what's your proposal from your research that people can do in advance to try and have people around them at this time of life if they don't have family or they're not close to their family?
Okay, so We talk about a thing called, we call it network-centred care, so that's about being at home. We're all part of networks. They might be really small, there might only be 2 or 3 people. But what we've found is that if you've just got 2 or 3 people, that's enough. It would be nice if it was more, but actually that's enough. It could be your neighbour, it might be the local pharmacist, it might be a school teacher, or it might be a really dear friend that you've had forever. So what we need to do before we actually get to the stage of dying is talk to those people who are important. Don't assume it's your family. It may be, it may not be. And I would encourage services to not just assume it's family as well, actually.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on that issue of people who don't have family and and how that is managed in the worlds that you live and work in? Do you want to speak, Des?
Well, I can only speak from my experience at Wolper, because I haven't worked in any of the larger hospitals. But one of the amazing things about Wolper is that the family is extended immediately by the entire staff. And there's patient after patient and family member after family member say this is the most amazing, caring environment. And everybody's in it, from the cleaner through to the person who brings the food, nursing staff, the doctors, and all other support workers. And people just feel that they have the support around them. People feel that they have the support, direct support. And these people become family. But, I understand that this is a huge issue in larger institutions and maybe in more remote places. But certainly in this small hospital with its 11 palliative beds, nobody really dies feeling totally neglected or alone.
Would anyone else like to comment on this? I understand New York has the highest number of single people in the world, so they must have systems in New York, but...
I was just going to make the comment that to be at home towards... to be at home towards the very end, there is not a lot of services that are available for 24 hours a day over a period of time. We do have services for 48 hours, and sometimes we can extend it even a little bit longer to give you nursing care. But you need to be at home at some stage. If no one else will do it, you need to be able to have some money to pay for carers. And that can be a very expensive issue. I know at Montefiore that in our palliative care unit there, we now have a group of volunteers who will stay with people who have no families so that at night they don't feel lonely. So there is trying to rectification of that problem. And I think the Sacred Heart also is trying to find volunteers to do that so people aren't alone.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say I'll return for our second question in a moment. And I wanted to let you know that Dr. Kathrine Hammill, the occupational therapist, unfortunately was ill and wasn't able to come tonight. But I have another question here.
Anne Meller, you were talking about the enduring guardianship and then the order in which people would make decisions for you if you didn't have one. And you said spouse number 1 and carer number 2. Well, where do children come in?
Children, is that right?
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, so you haven't got a guardian, you haven't got a spouse, you haven't got a carer, then it becomes any other relative or friend with a close and continuing relationship. So one of your children may in fact be your carer at some point, or say you go into residential care, who provided the majority of that social supportive care prior to you going in, they would be classified as the carer. But for a lot of people, they don't have that relationship. So your children, if they're not your carer, or you haven't appointed them as a guardian, then they would be classified as any other relative or friend with a close and continuing relationship.
It's fair to say, Anne, isn't it, that there's a big push at the moment by state governments to get people to get enduring guardians and enduring powers of attorney to avoid this sort of confusion in acute situations.
That's right. And so, like, I see lots of families and patients will say, look, I've got 2 kids and we've had really good discussions and they understand what I want and I don't think there'll be a dispute with them So we leave it at that. They don't feel a burning need to appoint someone. Other people really want somebody else, or they're closer with one person than another, and they'll just say, look, I think this person, I want them to make the decisions, and you're just going to have to wear it, Sonny.
We've got a follow-up comment.
Oh, only I thought children would be often, surely, the ones who appoint the carer. So surely the children who appoint the carer would come ahead of the carer in the decisions.
No, well, the children would be the carers if they're providing that support. If they're paid carers, like if it's the home care worker coming in, they're paid. They're not in that hierarchy. It's an unpaid carer. So it's a family member, they're coming and doing the shopping, they're helping with showering, they're driving to appointments. That's how we classify a carer. They might get the Centrelink allowance or payment as a carer, but a lot of people just stop working and do that role.
But I think it's fair to say that many... did you want to comment, Liz?
Look, I suppose I see the other side, Julie, where patients come in acutely unwell and it hasn't been thought about, and that's why we refer to Anne, because what we try and avoid in the hospital system is a patient that's needing acute care or needing palliative care, and we can't have a clear pathway of decision. They say, oh, Mum's 99 and we never thought that she might die. And, you know, the children are shocked, and they often might have large families that have different thoughts and, you know, a bit of guilt playing. They might not have visited Mum as much, and it's not really doing Mum service at all. What we want Anne to do is address the issues early, so she has a say in what she wants to do, and the children are comfortable, and it's not an anxious situation for the children who are traumatised and often start arguing.
I'm going to take one more... Oh, actually, I'll take a couple more questions because it's a lively room, and that's what we like when we're talking about dying. So I'm skiddling along, and I'll hold it. Don't worry, close to your mouth.
Well, I want some information about making a living will.
I'll come back to you, Anne. Do you want to define some terms? What's a living will? What's an advanced care directive? What do we say here in New South Wales?
Yes, the terms are used interchangeably. So you write a will for when you die. Some people will say to me, I've done my will, it's all there, but that's for when you're gone. That's what happens to your assets after you die. A will is about how you want you to be cared for and treated if the time comes when you can't speak for yourself. So it only is sort of pulled out to give us some direction about what's important to you. I'll differentiate a plan and a directive, and a directive is the same as a living will. So an advanced care plan can be written by anyone, and it can be written, it usually just gives some guidance about what's important in your life, but it's not giving specific instructions. In New South Wales, we have what would be called a valid advanced care directive. Is more formal. It's recognised by the common law. We've had 2 cases in New South Wales in 2009 and 2014 where a judge has looked at a patient's advanced care directive and it met the following criteria. The person was competent when it was written. They clearly understood what they were writing, and they've often refused treatment. You don't have to refuse a treatment, but the treatment's refused. So they've said, I don't want that treatment. They've done it in advance. So they were capable, and there's not a question about their mental capacity at the time that was signed. It's clear and specific, and it relates to the situation that's arisen. Are we there yet? That often comes up. And it was done without undue influence. So no one was standing over them saying, here, sign this. So if people, I'm happy to see people at home and help them develop their advanced care plans, or do they want to do a directive? We know Jehovah's Witnesses, they'll have a very specific card about blood transfusion. So that 2009 case was very much about a patient up in the Hunter, New England area who refused dialysis. So we know about blood transfusion, but they weren't too sure about dialysis. So that went to the courts and a judge ruled on that. So we can say if a directive is valid, it needs to be honoured by the treating doctors.
And could I just say, and team, I'm just up here, we've got another question. In a situation where you're with a geriatrician, a general practitioner, a palliative care physician, you're likely to know the family, have seen the documents, and it's an easy, hopefully, guided path. But what about situations where someone has a sudden heart attack and arrives in an ambulance and their documents aren't with them, and we don't have yet systems that are all connected by computers? You know, I'm interested in, I guess, Liz, working in an acute care hospital. How often do you see these documents? In what way is this information communicated to you?
It comes often when patients...
Much closer.
We see the documents when mainly patients come from facilities. I have had 1 or 2 patients where the patients come in the middle of the night and it's not come with a patient, which has been disappointing. But in general, the facility will have the Advanced Care Directive that's usually done on admission or in the first part of the patient's admission to their facility. I've also got some patients. I've got a patient who carries it in his wallet, ready to go and to get that out if anything were to happen. And so that's when you really see it. But sometimes they're tucked away and they're hidden and we don't know about them until a guardian might come in and say, look, there is the Advanced Care Directive. This is clearly what Mum has thought when she was able to make her own decisions.
And so would you encourage people, if you could pass it over to Debbie in a second, I'll just ask one more question. Would you encourage people who make these documents to give copies to their trusted family members?
Definitely. They say that it should be separate from when you make your enduring guardian document because you don't want to necessarily tie them to it, because often you might want to rethink the living will or come back to it. But I think giving documents, copies of it to the GP, I mean, it's often when you're admitted to the hospital, and might be able to probably so you answer that question a bit better, but I definitely think sharing it amongst your families and friends and your enduring guardian so people can access it is important.
Thank you. Could you pass up to Debbie, because I think she wants to speak here.
Really just to reinforce that, and from a research perspective, it's really good to hear that you are seeing them, but actually don't rely on just writing the documents. Talk to people, because often the documents aren't seen when you want them to be seen. As we were saying, they're hidden away or people don't know. So it's really important that you have conversations with people about what you want, because that conversation may be the thing that's listened to, not the piece of paper, because they can't find the piece of paper or they don't see it. So they've been around for a little while now, but on the whole, they're not usually picked up and seen by the people who need to be seeing them. So talk to people.
Thank you. Yes, go, Des, yeah.
I just want to change the tack slightly, and the importance of the legal side and the clinical side is huge. But there is also an emotional side, and one of the things which, and this arises, of course, depends on the situation with the particular family and with the person that is dying, is that sometimes they realise stuff which they want to express to their families, or they notice that there's a whole lot of conflict in the family, and sadly often in that room when people do come together, conflicts do arise. And so, for example, had a young woman who was dying about a year ago. Three young children ranging from 10 years old downwards. And she was highly distressed at the tension in various parts of her family and with regard to access to those children. And we sat down and we discussed it. And I said to her, would you like to find a way to express this to the various people in your family? And she said, yes, I'd love to be able to. If you could interview me, we can work out what to discuss, and we can videotape it, and then it can be played to them. Obviously, it's not a legally binding thing, but at least what they did, they were able to hear and to see her express wishes of how she wanted the family to relate to the children and to love these children. The other thing which I'm finding that more and more people are interested in doing is writing an emotional will. And the emotional will is the things that are important to me in my life. Who would I like to bequeath them to? So if what I love to do is to go down to the beach in the afternoon and look at the ocean, who of my family or friends who I think I would love to bequeath this to because they love nature? So all the things that I've loved in my life, I'm going to bequeath them to special people in my life who I think will be able to enjoy that, and also it's a beautiful way to be remembered.
And do people write it down, or do you videotape them, or how do they convey
We
this?
write it down, and I help them write it down if that's what they want.
I'm from a different model. It's home away from home. It's Group Homes Australia. But I wanted to ask Philip, Liz and Des, you've all mentioned the comfortable death. And Philip, you were very emphatic about no euthanasia. Can you explain, because I think there's often confusion about the use of morphine in dealing with pain at the end of life?
I like to think of morphine as just another drug. It's a drug that relieves pain, and that's how I use it. And it's no different when I have a patient in heart failure. I give them some fluid tablets, and I give them as many as they need to relieve their fluid. And that's the way I think about morphine at the end of life. If people are in pain, I use morphine. If they're restless or they're anxious, I might give them a Valium. I wouldn't use morphine. I use morphine as a specific cause to treat a symptom called pain. I give them other drugs for other conditions. So although people think about morphine as a panacea, when you're dying, you should get pain, you should get morphine, that's not how palliative care works. We give people what they require. But often when people are near the end, lying in bed, they get stiff and you go to move them and they cretch and they look like that. So there is a little bit of pain. But that doesn't mean they have to have heaps of the drug. And that's not our aim. Our aim is to relieve pain. Our aim is, if we start thinking about our aim to end life, then that's not palliative care, it's not good medicine. It's about relieving symptoms. It just happens that we use this drug that has a terrible name. But it has been used safely for many centuries, and it is quite a, believe it or not, a safe drug in a medical sense when it's used properly in the wards.
Thank you. I've got another question here.
Okay. I was just a bit interested. My name's Terry Houlihan, and I've been in medicine and intensive care and things like this for quite a while. I was thinking, I feel very sad when patients decide, or friends, they want to go to the Gold Coast to live. They want to go out beyond Bath or somewhere to live, and they've maybe got the funds to do it then, but then you can see they're not too far from the end, and it's really quite sad if they go away from all their friends. You know, I've noticed that a few times. It's also particularly worried about people that don't attend any sort of religious function at all and haven't been near a church or a mosque or whatever for 30 years, and then they die and someone tries to give them a lot of fairly common talk at this stage, and they have no real way to use it. Yeah, of course, alcoholics make a big mess at the end of their life quite often. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
I might take that as comment, unless anyone wishes to respond. Is there anyone else on this side with a question, or I'll go back to my second question over here? Yes, thank you. I'll take two more from the floor and then I'll come back to my panel.
Thank you. I've just got two questions. Is it true that if you volunteered to be an organ donor, you have virtually sentenced yourself to die in hospital?
We'll do one at a time. Can anyone speak about organ donation?
Look, as a generalisation, to donate your organs, if you're talking about your heart or your lungs or your liver, your pancreas or your kidney, you have to actually, you need to be in a hospital because it's normally a terminal event. If one kidney is certainly different, but if you're giving your liver, you can't live without a liver. So it's only because you've had some catastrophic event that you're on a respirator and you're at the end of their life that you therefore can give those organs. So in a way, the question is, that's correct. You can only give your organs and be in hospital. But you can also donate your cornea, and you don't have to be in hospital for that. The eyes, they give the cornea. So you could do that, and you don't need to be in hospital because they can be collected after death. But the other organs, in theory, you have to be alive or on a respirator with some type of blood pressure to give those type of organs, or they deteriorate too quickly and they can't be used for other people.
Thank you.
And when it comes to palliative care, if you want to die in a hospice, is it true that you're limited to, the final 2 weeks of life? In other words, there's a quota or a time limit on how long you can stay in palliative care in a hospice?
I think that the answer is you're allowed to stay in a hospice depending on your needs as long as you like. So sometimes people come into the hospice and
A bit louder, please.
Sorry, sometimes people come into the hospice and their condition just plateaus out and they remain very stable and they don't need lots of medical attention, they need good nursing care. So they may be suggested they move to a nursing home. Other patients can come in and they're just slowly deteriorating, and we can see that they're deteriorating over a period of weeks, and it may even be months, and they will stay in the hospice. So there's no fixed time limit at all. From the health funds, they ask that the patient be reviewed every 35 days to see that it's appropriate they stay where they are. And again, health funds will say that if your needs can be met by a nursing home, just that you're needing good nursing care, then it's not appropriate to stay in a private institution.
Could I ask, in your experience, do people sometimes move in and out of a hospice?
Definitely. I think you'll find that, I'm not sure of figures, but I think they're talking around 60% of patients are discharged the first admission to a hospice. They come in for symptom control, they're managed, they may go out, return to the community, they may come back.
Thank you so much. If you could pass down to Debbie Horsfall, I think you're wishing to make a comment.
Just that I think that it depends on where you are as well and the hospice. So regarding where you live or which hospice you might be thinking about, it's worth checking it out with that particular hospice because there are different practices that happen across the state.
Debbie, while I've got you, one of your passions is practical action people can take to die at home. And I think you've got some figures on the number of people who say they wish to die at home and the number of people who actually die at home. Could you just speak to that?
So it's remained pretty stable for a number of years. So if you ask people where they'd like to die, they will say at home. 80% will say they're at home. In this country, it's about 16 to 18% of people who get to die at home. So that's a massive difference between 80% who want it, 16 to 20 at the most, who get to die at home. So part of what our research has been about is talking to carers and caring networks who successfully cared for someone to die at home. Because there are not very many of them, but they've done it. So what are the things that are necessary for that to happen? They need, as I say, a network of support. Can be as small as 3 people, can be as big as 20 people. So you need to get the message out there. What we found is that as long as people know you need help, usually enough people turn up to give you help. So it's getting the information out there, getting the message out there, and accepting help. If someone says, "Can I help you?" you say, "Yes, bring me a loaf of bread." Doesn't matter if you've got 6 loaves of bread in the freezer. Someone's coming into your home, you're having a conversation, you're learning to accept help, because we're trained to be not very good at accepting help. We want to be independent. Well, when we're dying or caring for someone that's dying, actually we need people. The other thing that you need to know is what are the services in your local area. Don't just rely on what you think. Find out what is available. Do you need home care? Do you want to clean it? Can your neighbour cut the grass? Those sorts of things. Do you need someone to help you drop the children off at school? So know what your needs are. Because services aren't going to do those things. They'll do the things that you've just heard about. They're not necessarily going to drop your kids off or help with the homework or do some cooking, those sorts of things. So know those things and put stuff in place.
And could I ask you, you made reference to the United Kingdom and the National Health Service and network-centred care. What is it that the British are doing that you think is worthy of us hearing about?
So this was actually our research that some people in the National Health Service picked up. And in one particular area, it's called Frome, which is a particular area of the National Health Service in England. They just put in place what I just said. So when you know that you're caring for someone that's dying or the person themselves knows they're dying, you let people know. You sit down and you draw your network. Who are the people you can call on to help? And you draw that out, and then someone helps you, go and tell them that you need help. And what has happened as a result of that is a 30% drop in hospital admissions when people are dying. It's huge. And it's really simple.
Can I come over to Dr. Harper, Liz Harper? We were having a quick chat beforehand, and you said that when someone says they want to die at home, your first response is a slight flinch. So can you tell us, what are your concerns if you have someone who says, I want to die at home?
Well, look, my main concern, Julie, is I want my patients to be not in pain, not to suffer, and a lot of my patients might be socially isolated, and I am fortunate I am in the eastern suburbs where I do have Wolper, Sacred Heart. I have patients who financially can be in a good position, but I do sort of think, how is their GP going to guide them? What service can I have? How can I assure that the comfort care that we've tried to give here can be followed at home? So, I mean, I have to admit I'm a hospital doctor and I want my patients to be comfortable. So that's why I do use the palliative care service, who enjoy that challenge. There are limited resources. You know, it is, for me, to support someone at home, I can't get home care easily. There's no packages that we can get directly from the hospital. They're all rehabilitation, well-person focused from my area. So it is tricky to see that they've got the supports and the practical help. And we do have a lot of isolated patients.
Would either Anne or Dr. Redelman like to comment on that? Like, have you seen successful dying at home that you can share with us? This amazing gap between what people say and what actually happens. Do we need to change things, or can it be done if you want to do it?
As I said, I don't work in palliative care, but I speak a lot with the staff at Sacred Heart, and what has been developed through the Commonwealth in recent years has been palliative care packages. So a little bit like there are aged care packages to support people at home with support, shopping, transport, that sort of assistance. Palliative care services, so I think Sacred Heart here and perhaps Hammill Care, the staff at those services are able to broker out about 48 hours of care to someone who's at home dying, and it's up to the family or up to the person to decide how they want that 48 hours to be, that support to be provided. It might be someone to come in for 4 hours a week for 6 weeks, or it might be just those last couple of nights where everybody's very tired and needs some sleep, and there's a lot of care needs requirement there. But Sacred Heart, the staff there need to make that referral. So again, you'd need to go through Sacred Heart. They're the provider in this area to get that. And the staff have said, the nurses have said, it's been a really good program, and there should be more of those packages for people who are dying. But the other Commonwealth aged care places assist people just in terms of home support and aged care support.
Thank you. Philip, would you comment?
I think that those patients who we get home and we put the service in, I think they work well. I mean, we always offer them that if things change or they feel that they change their mind, there's always a backup of a hospital bed. We've always looked after our community patients first before all other admissions. So there always is a backup and a support. But it becomes a question that they come into hospital because it's just physically too much. Sometimes people's condition deteriorates. They need two persons to move them. Well, the family might be one person, and at time, especially at night, people go home and it's hard to get two people, and that may be real questions just to prevent that. And sometimes, occasionally, people turn around and say, "Look, I want to be the spouse, or I don't wish to be the carer," and so they change their views and they come into hospital. That's part of what we offer. But there are wonderful advantages for being at home rather than being in hospital too.
What are they?
Well, I think the first thing is there's no cleaners who wake them up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, they run the show at home. I
want to die with my cavoodles. I mean, I'm not joking. Is anyone else very attached to their small dog? Anyone going to back me? I actually ran a palliative care conference in Canberra, and I got a whole lot of red wine, and I said, I'll give a bottle of red wine to every professional service provider of palliative care who can show me a picture of someone in their bed, in their establishment with an animal. And you wouldn't believe it, within 3 hours I had pictures of people with horses, chickens, in the Italian one. I'm serious. The inside, that people were ringing all over Australia, and they were emailing in at the amazing number of animals that had been inside a hospice.
But most of the palliative care will let you bring their dogs in. We used to have a dog and a cat in the hospice, but people kept feeding them and they got too fat, and their health wasn't very good.
Yes, can we come to Des, please? And then I've got a lady here with a question.
So on the experience at Wolper, and as Phil said, people come in and then they go, if they're capable of being stabilised, and they go home and they come
Just
back
a little bit louder, Des.
and then they come back again. But it also depends on, I think that with the majority of the elderly people, it's very difficult for them to be cared for adequately at home by their families and friends, and if they don't have the resources to be able to have the right carers in place 24/7. But one of the things which Wolper certainly does, if the patient is capable of it and the family members are prepared to take the responsibility, and the doctor thinks that nothing will happen, then people get gate passes and they will go out for a meal or half a day or go to a movie, and the hospital welcomes people bringing their pets in to come and see the patients. There was even an incident a couple of years ago where a woman wanted to see her horse. She was a sort of proud equestrian, and the registered nurse organised for bringing the horse round the side and his head through the window and patted the horse. So, it's just a matter of, if you've got people who are prepared to go that extra mile, then that happens. But dying at home, if that works for you, and I know from a very personal experience, and my daughter-in-law died 2 years ago, and my son nursed her at home all the way through, and a huge circle of friends and family were around at the time that she died. And it was okay. And the medical team from St Vincent's were amazing, the community team coming out and servicing her medical needs. But it was just the circumstances allowed for it.
If I could just say very quickly, because we haven't referred much to acute care hospitals, but I've had a direct family experience of someone transitioning to palliative care within an acute setting, and the family being given a private room and really taking over that room for 3 days while the person died. And it was really a palliative unit within an acute setting. So I just think it's good to recognise that good work, which probably differs. There's a bit of luck, isn't there, about which hospital you're in and who's staff and duty and so on. If it's all right, I might just take this lady's question, and then I promise I'll come back to you.
My question is to Dr. Redelman. I know that some people react very badly to morphine, so you mentioned good drugs. What are the other drugs that would be suitable other than morphine? Yeah, because my friend was very ill, she's fine now, but she couldn't take the morphine, they had to give her other drugs. So
Morphine's a narcotic, and there's a number of other different narcotics. There's what's called oxycodone, hydromorphone, fentanyl, methadone, lots of them. It's just it might be a matter of trying them.
Right.
And you've got to understand a lot of patients get allergies to morphine, which means that they vomited once or they got a rash. They're not true allergies.
Oh, but that was what happened. That was the vomiting, yeah. and she had to be taken off of the morphine and given, I think it was tramadol.
There's plenty of other choices.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to comment, Deb?
Sort of picking up on a question earlier in some ways, Australia's got really, really good palliative care services. We come out near the top in terms of the level of service, the sort of care that's given. So all this work that happens is really, really good. Where we fall down is where that palliative care is given. That's the difference. Palliative care is necessary and essential, and we're really good at it. But people aren't getting it where they want it. Now, I'm not in palliative care, I'm just talking from the point of view of the community and carers who I've spoken to. And we're falling behind. For an example, there's one area in Scotland where the default position is you die at home unless you've got a very good reason to go to hospital. In Australia, it's completely the opposite. You die in hospital unless you've got a very good reason to go home, which just fascinates me, and I just needed to say that.
Thank you. I'll just come back to the second question here, and then don't hold back if you've got another question, because we're heading towards the home line.
Yes, my second question was, at what point does the advancement in medical technology blur the line between living and existing?
So tell us what you're thinking. Make a comment.
Well, there has to be quality of life. I mean, there has to be some sort of reason to want to live, rather than just existing because of drugs or machinery or robotics, which is something of the future. There has to be a reason that one would like to be alive, rather than being kept alive.
So could I have a comment from Liz and from Dr. Redelman? And I come to the doctors mainly because you, in a way, hold the power on a lot of this.
Well, firstly, that's the role of having an advanced care directive and defining, and it's wonderful when families have spoken to their children. Mum would never want to be in a ventilator. Mum would never want to have a tube down her throat. And that mum would never want to be in a vegetable, is often the word people use, in a facility. And I can say, well, she's had a stroke. Let's plan that this is going to be, we need to have a good pathway, and we'll introduce Dr. Redelman. Or so I actually very rarely see patients that are kept alive. I think it's in aged care, we are really all about comfort care, practical treatment, reversing what is reversible. Particularly, I mean, the fellow that I have had a pacemaker, you know, he's still playing golf, and he wants to still play golf, and, you know, it's for symptom control. So I think that's where the blurred lines between palliative care and active care, it's difficult to discern. What do you think?
I think it's, unfortunately, I think a lot of my colleagues are very keen to keep treating. But you, as a patient, if you can say, no more, enough is enough. As we say, ganook is ganook. They understand that also you have that right to, and that's what the advanced care and all these things are all about, is you saying enough. And then the doctors are obliged to do what you ask them. They have to do what you say, otherwise it is assault. So stand up for your rights and say no. You can do that. And then they'll stop and think about it. It's really, you know, and that's what it's all about. If you feel that, if someone feels their quality of life isn't what they want, then they have a right to refuse everything. And people do. Often people stop dialysis, even though they're up and going, and they say, look, this is just too hard for me to go to hospital for 8 hours, 3 times a week. This isn't what I call my quality of life. And they say, I would like to stop dialysis. And they're well.
I was just saying,
nice and close.
Often Philip and I are involved in the hospital system because we get a chance to step back. We have colleagues who are very concerned about their organ, and they're going to keep their organ alive, and everyone has, I mean, an organ for a body, a respiratory physician, a cardiologist, a nephrologist, and often Philip and I are involved to be part of a team, and we'll talk to the doctors, are we doing the right thing by this patient? What's the pathway? What does the patient want? And what, let's go back to dealing with symptoms, and how can we make this patient's life a bit better? So often that's the role of a general physician, a palliative care, a geriatrician, and a rehab physician to look a little bit at the big picture.
Could I just put in a counter-narrative for a second and perhaps get a response? I mentioned very quickly at the beginning that 4 years ago I had stage 4 cancer. And why I mention it is that when I made an advanced care directive and when I made an enduring guardian, I made it clear who the person was I trusted, and I gave them discretion. I said, just ask them. I trust them. And then I have that's my partner, and I have an ongoing dialogue with that person. But I didn't get specific. And the reason why is I've thought it before I got cancer, you never know what you're going to think until you're faced with it. And that was exactly what happened. I had a sore throat. A doctor put a little thing down my nose with a camera, and he said, you've got cancer. And the very first thing that popped out of my mouth, and you need to know this is what I do for a living, and I was a radio broadcaster with the ABC for 25 years. But there wasn't a nanosecond before I said, if you've got to take my voice, take it. I want to live. It just came straight out of me, the will to live. Now, there are a lot of people who've had my cancer who don't speak. They don't even swallow. They fed through a tube. And I might be with that person if I get recurrence. But I discovered when my rubber hit the road that living meant more to me than speaking and swallowing. So, you see, I worry a little bit. I don't know if, Anne, you want to comment on what the advice is on too much specifics, because I don't think you really know. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about that. I'm 62, and I dare to say I don't think of that as old. But, of course, we never know when our moment will come, do we?
I guess what a directive only becomes valid when you can't speak for yourself. So up until the point, you can say, I'm going to keep going. If this treatment will give me, if it's 5% success rate, I'm going to go hammer and tong. And I think Julie sort of mentioned before, at what point do we change lanes? And I've heard intensive care specialists go, they're going all out, they're treating here, but at some point there's going to be some signal, a fever or a clinical sign that means, uh-oh, this isn't working, and you're going to need to change lanes really quickly, just like you're on that highway. So it's good to have the backup plan. And yeah, we know this person wants to go full steam ahead. They want to take all the risks. How much discomfort are you prepared to tolerate in order to get that outcome? And for some people, dialysis 3 times a week is no drama at all.
Well, Mark Colvin, who's just died, had, the ABC broadcast, had many years on dialysis before he had the kidney donation, and then had other difficult treatment. And his last tweet was, "It's all been bloody marvellous." He had that tweet lined up for when he was dead.
I just wanted to comment on what you said. That
really loud.
That even though your voice has been your living, and that's what you do, and that's how you charm all of us in this room, that you're prepared to forgo that if it meant you could continue living. And often that when somebody is at the end stage of life, the goals become different goals. And a woman by the name of Christine Longacre wrote a beautiful book called Facing Death and Finding Hope. And so hope changes. So hope is not hope of a cure. Hope is to be in that moment and find a way to make that moment as meaningful as possible. That interaction with my family or little goals. I want to stay alive. It's my granddaughter's birthday in 3 weeks' time. That's my goal. Or I had a patient once who it was during the time of the Rugby World Cup, and he was determined to get to the final. So these were goals that gave him hope and gave the grandmother hope. So it changes.
Exactly. I wanted to ask us one more thing, and then I'll just see if there's any more questions, and we'll close in about 5 minutes. But we've focused enormously, understandably, on the person who may be approaching the end of their life. But of course, most of us have people around us who are going through enormous stress at that time. And I know that you work with families around dying and also after death. Can you tell us a little bit about the services that you are involved with so that people are aware of them?
Well, working with the families with who their loved one is dying, the questions that they often ask is, how do we approach them? What do we say? What's the right thing to say? What's the wrong thing to say? And they find it very liberating when the first thing I will say to them, you can never tell your loved one enough how many times, as many times as you want to, how much you love them. And so keep telling them. That's the most important gift that you can give to them at this moment in time. When you're having a conversation in the room, include your loved one. Don't assume that because they might be asleep or drugged or whatever it might be at that moment in time, that they can't hear you. Assume that they can, because very often they can. They might not be able to communicate. Don't talk about them. Include them, talk with them. So they are very much there. They are still the person that you've always loved, even though at this point in time they can't express themselves that way. So that's, and people find a lot of comfort. The other thing which people find useful is that You can turn around to a loved one and say, let's assume it was a mother saying, Mum, the last thing in this world is, for me, is that I want is for you not to be here tomorrow. However, I don't want you to stay and to hang on just for me. If you feel this is the right time for you to go, and this is your moment, I will continue. I will find a way to integrate you into my life after you've gone. As a Canadian philosopher, and this is the second part of your question, how do I work with people who are bereaved? The whole process of grief therapy is, the Canadian philosopher Thomas Attig said, the heart of grieving is moving from loving in presence to loving in separation. So how do I continue to incorporate you in my life even though you're no longer physically present? Because effectively the grief process is a process of honouring your loved one, honouring yourself, and honouring that relationship which the two of you have created, because you are a part of me and I'm a part of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel that's a good place to end, and I wonder if you could give our panel a warm round of applause. And I'd like to hand back to Dr. Shell to close the evening.
And of course we have to say thank you to Julie. Thank you very much. And for most of you, there's, outside we have a list. If you can put yourself on the list so we can keep in touch for future functions that we're holding. The next one will be on Monday. It'll be on Monday this time, 3rd of July, which will be another Q&A with Julie, living with diabetes. When diabetes sadly has become a very serious, disease entity in our community and around the world. So that'll be quite an enlightening, I'm sure, an informative evening. And we just want to make sure that we have quite a few pamphlets and things and information to give you about JewishCare. If you're interested, please make sure that you take advantage of that. And we say thank you. Thank you to Event Theatres for this evening. And thank you to our film man and thank you to the panel.